Right, if we look at the Australian side now, I'm thinking of South Africa first Test match. I'm probably going to have some controversial opinions here, just because I'm looking at this basically from a stats point of view. There's a lot of Australian cricketers that I'm not a big fan of, but I'm gonna be try and be impartial here. Opening the batting, I think you've got to have Warner and Pekovsky. Warner, yes, there are a few people calling for his head, like my mum, even though he only played 4 innings this year, and 2 of them were basically without a groin. I'm not a big fan of David Warner. I won't use the word hate, as my mum taught me that word has a big impact on people, but I'm not a fan at all. I don't really rate him as a bloke, even though I don't know him. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of the way he goes about his cricket, but I think you do have to have him there up the top. You've got to have some sort of consistency. I don't think you can be rolling into South Africa with Pekovsky having played 1 test and then a new opener trying to find their feet. So I think Warner's up there in the top. He's averaged over 47 in the last 2 years, so he's certainly not there because of nothing really. He's been pretty successful over time, and he likes the conditions in South Africa, similar to some of the Australian pitches. I do think you've got to have Pekovsky there. What he showed in his first test, he just looked to be a test cricketer, really. The form he's had in the Sheffield Shield, it was only 2 or 3 matches that he played, but the consistency that he showed, I think you've got to be rolling into the first test in South Africa with him opening it up with Warner. Then 3 and 4, Labuschagne Smith, not even really worth mentioning. Probably the 2 best batsmen in world cricket right now. That's actually savage for me. Kano's been in great form, and we haven't seen Virat for a while. But I'll say, I think they are 2 of the best, and they are obviously the 3 and 4 for the Australian cricket team. Now 5's where it gets interesting, because I think Matthew Wade batted at 5 in the last test, if I believe. But he is realistically, in his last 14 test matches, he's averaged 31, so he's dropped for me. He probably makes a squad, but I don't care about the squad. Guys, you'd be looking at Khawaja. There's people calling for him to come back into the team. There's also calls for blokes like Nick Maddison, maybe even a Curtis Patterson to come back in the side. But I'm actually going for someone who just got dropped. He didn't have a great summer at all, but if you just look at his statistics from the last 2 years, it's probably stiff that he got dropped in the first place, and it's Travis Head. 20 innings, he scored 794 runs at an average of 44, 200s, 450s, so, a few bigger scores would be appreciated from the Australian selectors, but someone averaging 44 at number 5 is certainly nothing to scoff at. I think Australia sometimes, as a cricket country, gets a little bit obsessed and wants every batsman to be averaging over 50, but that's just not going to happen. Usually each generation, you're probably lucky to have 2 blokes average over 50, and we've got Labuschagne and Smith in Australia. So I think Warner with an average of 47, Head with an average of 44, I think you are 100% taking them in your side to complement Labuschagne and Smith. So I'm actually rolling him with Travis Head at number 5. It's controversial. Also can bowl a few tweakers as well, but I'm not really factoring that in. I'm not going to take into account age, because I do hate how often age is taken into account, but he still does have time, so I think it's worth him having another crack at it. And then all-rounder spot, Australia loves an all-rounder, and I think you've got to stick with Cameron Green. I don't think he's had enough tests to drop him. Yes, his bowling's a bit of a worry, the fact that he hasn't taken a wicket, but I think it's worth giving him a crack on a bouncy track in South Africa. I think his height should be quite useful, and with the bat, he showed signs in this test series on multiple occasions, so I think he's definitely deserving of his spot. Tim Paine is the captain. I don't know if he really deserves to be there, but he's going to get picked, so not really much point having a conversation about it. Now, looking at the bowlers, I haven't said too much controversial at the moment. Basically, the only interesting things are Head at 5 and Pekovsky back up the top, opening with Warner. The bowlers, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of Mitchell Starc. I don't rate him from the eye test, but if you look at his stats, it is hard to ignore. The last 24 months, he's had a bowling average of under 23, and he's had a better strike rate than Paddy Cummins. And I know he often gets brought up onto bowl against the tail, but I think look, I don't want to say it, but I think he's got to be there. Like, it's outrageous from me. And I was saying only earlier in the podcast that I do think he might be the sacrificial lamb for this bowling unit. And I do think Jai Richardson or James Pattinson will play the first test instead of him. But if I'm the selector, I'm picking Stark based on these statistics. He also had a pretty solid Shield campaign to start the year off. He played 2 matches, bowling average of under 30 in tough bowling conditions, and strike rate of 50, which was the 6th best in the competition. So I'm picking Stark. I'm also picking Paddy Cummins and Josh Hazlewood. They're both there. 2 world-class bowlers. So, yes, it's controversial. The pace bowling attack didn't get it done in this test series, but I'm going with them again, despite me not being a big fan of Stark. I think their statistics have earned them another crack at it. I'd give Stark another 2 tests in South Africa to see how he goes, and then maybe look to bring in Paddo or Richardson for that last test. The spinning options, though, are making a change there. Nathan Lyon, bowling average of 32, strike rate of 69 in the last 2 years. I'm sorry, I don't think he's going to get dropped, but I'm dropping him. And this is tough because we haven't seen any other spinners given a crack in an Australian outfit, so we're going to have to base it off Sheffield Shield performances. And based off that, it's got to be the man who was in the bubble this whole time, Mitchell Swepson. In his 3 games in the Shield earlier this year, he had a bowling average of 21. He was in the top 10 for strike rate. He took 3 fifers, so he was bowling Queensland to victory on a couple occasions. And I think Mitch Swepson's the one I want to be there. I do often prefer wrist spinners to finger spinners as well, so Swepson's got that going for him. And yeah, I think Mitchell Swepson should be the number 10 for Australia in the first test over Nathan Lyon. And yeah, that's controversial. I don't think it will happen because Nathan Lyon's a bit of a cult hero in Australia, but I do think he's a severely overrated cricketer and he's probably been given too many tests. He's won Australia a couple tests here or there, but I'm going Mitch Swepson. I'm giving the young fella a crack. After all, he has had to quarantine with the Australian cricket team for 2 months and has not been given a crack, so also a bit of a reward there, I reckon. But it would be interesting to see how he goes. Not spin-friendly conditions in South Africa, but I think why not throw him right into the deep end, see if he sinks or swims. Now, finally,
it's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? No! Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.